Hey everyone, Panyo here. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of After Dinner Mints. I highly encourage everyone watching to join us in the Art Blocks Discord. A link to our Discord can be found in the description of this video. As always, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of our weekly show. And now I want to introduce our guest for this afternoon. We have generative artist Makio135.
Hey, hello, and thank you for having me today.
Thanks so much, Makio. How are you doing today?
Great. What time
Well,
is it
yeah,
for you?
For me, it's 10 in the morning, so a little bit on the earlier side, which is actually the perfect way to start the day. So yeah, I really appreciate you joining us on After Dinner Mints, and we have a lot to cover. I know a lot of people are interested to learn more about your Oro project, so we'll get into that a little bit later on. But maybe you can kind of kick things off and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's kind of a chaotic story, so I try to keep it short. But after 5 years spent in university studying Japanese because I wanted to, then economics because I thought I had to do some real studies to get a real work, I quit everything and worked during 2 years. And then finally, at 25, I went to design and art school because I was interested in graphic design and communication systems. And there, on my second year, I discovered processing through an open class, and it was love at first sight.
Okay,
Uh, because from a few lines of code, I was able to generate visuals, produce videos, and generate 3Ds that I could 3D print. Well, a whole new world. And since then, I've been exploring and sharing the magic that code can create. I worked as a freelancer for 10 years on art installation, web experiments, and real-time data visualization. And I've been sharing my learnings through classes and workshops in quite a lot of schools now and events as well. And I also shared many works on platforms like Open Processing, CodePen on Observable, or even tools on GitHub.
great. And I'm kind of curious, what are when you started getting into art, or maybe had a love for the art and started appreciating it, who were some of those artists that you kind of looked up to and inspired your work early on?
Yeah, sure. But coming from processing, I'm a huge fan for Cazares and Ben Fry through their work are totally different. One is really into art and generative art, and the other is more into data visualization. But I think it really pushed me to explore the different things that you can do with code, like always learning. I also went to electronics, and then later I discovered pioneers like Vera Molnar and 60 years of history of generative art, which blew my mind. And I'm still continuing to discover a lot of things.
Yeah, I feel like with this Web3 space, and then all the access to Discord and Twitter, it kind of opens up your eyes to a lot more artists and a lot more you know visual art that's just out there, and that we kind of learn to appreciate. But yeah, I'm curious to know, like, what was your introduction into the NFT and crypto space?
Sure. Well, it was in early March 2021. I followed Mario Klingerman, Joanny Lemercier, Matt Delaurier, and Frederic Van Hout, to name a few, which were on my Twitter timeline for many years before. And there was this site which was called Iketnung,
Hmm.
and I was already looking at NFTs with a really vague idea of what it was, but I wanted to learn and experiment by myself. So I joined it in the early days of Iketnung, and it was kind of a raw experiment. It was really weird, but really interesting at the same time because the UI and UX was really raw. Everyone was identified only as a wallet address, and and so we had to rely a lot on social medias like Discord or Twitter to get an idea of who was who on the network, on the website, I mean.
And I was going to ask actually, when you started learning about, when you got into Hiketnonk and started learning about NFTs and this digital art space that we're part of,
Mhm.
did it instantly click for you? Did it make sense, or did it take a little bit of time to kind of dig
No.
in a little bit and appreciate it over time?
Yeah, no, not at all. It took me it took me some time because at first I was like, okay, I had produced many visuals, loops, interactive experiments or generative pieces on the web, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna put a loop, a GIF loop on a website, and someone is going to buy it for real. and and yeah, it happened. And it was like, what? So I tried again and make a lot of connection at that time with many artists that were there. We helped a lot to each others, even to start just to send the first tezos to someone else, just to get an idea and to experiment with it. So it took a few days, I mean, to understand what was about selling and buying NFTs as well, because at first I was just wanted to try and had just the idea to sell pieces, but it quickly became also a way to collect pieces from other artists that I appreciated for years, and it really created a network from there.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually, now that we've talked about a little bit about the NFT crypto space, are you able to share with us, some of those early generative art pieces that you created?
Yeah, sure. Um, uh, I have my screen shared, I think.
Yep.
Um, so I think this is a shape that I'm still totally using on a collection that is called Slashes, which is an on-chain collection with a custom smart contract on Ethereum. But this piece goes back to October 20, 2012, 2012. So yeah, it's already 10 years old, and I have a lot of other, sorry, I went back to it. And I have a lot of other pieces that are on open processing or CodePen, and made many others during the 10 years before starting NFTs.
Great. Yeah, I can definitely see some of those influences on some of your like more recent work. So it's cool to kind of see, those early pieces that you created. Do you have any other pieces or?
Well, yeah, I do. Maybe I can go to CodePen. And well, along the years, as I said, I started with processing, and then when I left school, I was interested in sharing my work, so I started to work with JavaScript as well and work more in the browser to share my work and experiments. And so first I started with processing JS, which was a Java interpreter, a processing Java code interpreter, and then I started to learn other libraries and going more to vanilla JS, and experiment with different things like in 3D with 3JS. Um, and it was a way to share my learnings as well, because I learned mostly everything on the web. And so it was natural for me to create libraries and tools to share with others once I had a knowledge I could share with others.
Yeah, it seems like some of these early pieces are all animated. Was that kind of your focus early on, doing something that had a little bit of movement, or did you kind of focus any of it on static images as well?
No, at that time it was kind of the only thing that I knew. So I was only creating animated things or even interactive for some, uh, which were like here to play with typography to generate patterns. But yeah, at first I was only working on the web, as I was also working as a web developer for some websites. So I was only into real-time interactive pieces, and later on, as I was really influenced by artists like Biz and Bombs or Etienne Jacob, which are GIF loop artists. Um, I created my own tool. Maybe I can share it.
Yeah,
Uh,
please.
uh, which is based on Biz and Bombs template. Uh, this is a tool that I created on Observable to generate loops and export GIF or MP4 directly from the browser. And from there, I had created a lot of loops on Observable just before discovering Eketnunk and the world of NFTs, and which I think brings us to my first NFT, which was this one. I wanted to have something that was really representing my work and my style. So there was at that time way less color than I use now, but we already had a lot of movement, a lot of shapes that are moving, uh, a sense of speed, and an influence of architecture as well.
And how did you decide on, which piece to make? I'm sure that's got to be. Was that easy? Well, I guess I'm curious. Is that something that
Mhm.
was easy for you to do, or did it take some time to kind of figure out the exact piece, or was it more of just like experimenting and just trying something out and then going from there?
Oh, this piece was already made before minting it. I mean, I had not, I had already done a lot of different loops, but I chose this specific one because it really resonated with my work, with my style, and with what influences me, uh, like a way to connect with others, and the movement, as I said, and the different blocks, which are kind of a representation of the city or the data as well, the different flows that you can meet.
Hmm. Great. And where do you get inspiration for coding projects? Like I've talked to, some artists and maybe they go out in nature or maybe they go to the museums, check out some galleries or some exhibits or, what does it for you to get that inspiration?
For me, this is really the city, the flows of people, the flows of information, the flow of everything, of cars that you can have in a city, all the streets and the errands that you can have in a city, everything that you can discover when taking a new street. And this is really what influences me. Also, before going to an art school, so it's like 20 years ago, I was really into graffiti as well, and so I was doing a bit of urban exploration, going to old factories and finding places where I could paint with my friend and spend a nice afternoon. And so this influence really uh, sticked to me, and is really, and I'm trying to represent it right now again.
Hmm. Great. And how do you, like, once you have that inspiration, how do you prepare and get yourself in the zone, I guess, to code an actual project? Is there like I don't know. Do you have like a special place you go to, or do you surround yourself by music or something to
Well,
kind of
I
get you in
do.
the mind?
I do always have music. Like from the first thing when I wake up is putting on music. But no, I actually have like two different mode of producing, which is either I start with a blank page and I just try things and see where it can lead me. Sometimes giving it a few days before going again to it. Or the second mode is more thinking, having an idea or having the beginning of an idea, and I can spend a few weeks or even a few months thinking about it before starting to code. I want to think about every aspect of the piece before, or at least have a really clear idea of the piece before starting to code. Because sometimes just trying to code before I have a clear idea will lead me to something else. So these are the two different modes that I have for creating art.
Great. And actually, I'm curious to know now, since you mentioned, you start your day with music. What kind of music are you listening to these days?
I do hear a lot of different styles, even from ska music
Yeah,
to drum and bass or to rock. Or yeah, I do love to hear a lot of different styles. I even hear a lot of 8-bit music as well. And yeah.
very cool.
I've never been a good musician. I don't think that I have a good sense of rhyme, but but this is my thing, just to hear from music.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I do want to transition over to talk about your project that released on Art Blocks earlier this year called Oro. Yeah, can you start things off by telling us about the concept behind this project?
Yeah, sure. So the concept behind Oro is actually about wanderings. As I said before, uh, I'm really influenced by the errands that you can have in a town, and discovering so many things like lights, colors, paintings, street art that you can have anywhere. It's also a lot about the flows that you can have from people or for the environment. And I just wanted to have a piece where you can just contemplate everything, just having a sense of the speed of the environment while being static, and just having your eyes that can wander in the visuals by mixing some shapes that are really simple, like rectangles or circles, and others that are paths that are going with a really strong movement. And I wanted to mix all that. It was like a way to really define my style as a generative artist, and to define what are my influences that led me to this specific point of time.
Great. And the project name is Oro. Like, what is there any meaning behind this project name?
Yeah, sure. As I said, I studied Japanese, and it still have a strong influence on me as well. And so the word oro is a Japanese word that means wanderings, and it was really what I wanted to to give in the piece. As I said, I wanted to mark my influences, and since Japanese is and Orient arts are a strong influence on me, I wanted to give it um, how do you say, I wanted to make it a part of the piece, and by giving it a Japanese name, that was my way to do so.
Great, I love that. And how do you determine? We'll talk about you. I know you'll share some of these pieces later on, like some of your
Mhm.
favorites and surprises. But when looking at some of these individual mints, how do you determine the patterns and shapes that were involved in this specific project?
Oh, it was kind of a very long process. I worked on Horo for 7 months, and it was based on previous works during the last years, where I already had experimented with flow fields and EV strokes. But for Oro, I tried to go further, as I often do. I take some old pieces and I try to push them further. And for Oro, I wanted to create many uh, different flow field without sticking to the classic Perlin noise flow field. So I went for parametric curves to define the different flow fields and to get some really different visuals. And at first I only had the flow fields and the EV strokes, and then I added the idea of masking some parts of the visuals. Maybe I should go to this one. And I started to, as I said before, I wanted to reflect the influences of the city. So I started to create different type of recursive grids, and to represent different part of the city, and to give it really the impression of being in a wandering and discovering different places.
That's awesome. And I noticed that when I was looking, I spent some time past few days kind of zooming in on some of these specific mints and noticing that there's a lot of layers to each mint. How does the algorithm kind of determine the layering process, when creating each mint?
Oh, um, well, the algorithm for this part is pretty simple. I I start with a masking ID and a palette, of course, and a flow field. Then we also add the different layers, and since I wanted to have a strong uh, depth impression, I am creating a shadow for each path. So for that, I am using a texture where I draw the path, and um, I add its shadow on it, and then I copy this texture to a main canvas, because I didn't want to see the shadow through the path itself. So I am copying the texture and pasting it with some alpha, some transparency to paste it. And for every shape, they have a strong probability to be hidden by the masking, and just a few are going through it to make it go further than the canvas.
Excellent. And I was kind of spending a little bit of time also just looking through all the different features for each of the mints, and I was curious if you could kind of spend a little bit of time walking us through some of these different features, such as wandering, composition, lights, flow amount, fat caps. If you don't mind, just like
Yeah, sure.
guiding us through the
Mhm.
explanation of those.
Yeah, yeah, because I gave names to the different features. It might not be really easy to understand what they represent. So for the wandering, this is the style of flow field. So like the drift is a bit like a torrent of water that you can see. The exploration uh, is getting more like I would say the wind. It really gives a fast impression on the visuals. And we also have the journey and the adventure, which are more about crossing paths. It was also to mark some influences like classic painters like Mondrian or Jackson Pollock that I wanted to also express. And so this were the final four type of wanderings that I kept. At first, when I created the first version of Horo, I think I had like 7 different flow fields, and went through the different ones that were not as good as this one, like some like that. This visual is from the first version of Oro. I had also, so I had this kind of spaghetti noodles flow fed, and I just wanted then to focus on which were really interesting, and to keep the idea of space and movement and crossing people, mm, and went with the four last. For the composition, all composition I named after a specific part of a tone, or and so we do have the center, which is a single circle inside it. We have the block, which is a rectangle that will take the whole page. And then we have the buildings. So the buildings are uniform rectangles where all have the same size. The number of rectangles varies, as well as the direction, which can be either horizontal or vertical. And we also have the limits, which are a way to make the city disappear at the end of the city, like the edges of the city. And we also have the alleys. So for the alleys and the grid, the district, I created different recursive subdivision grids algorithms that I wrote. So for the alleys, I think this is a random distribution of the rectangle, if I remember correctly. The grid should be, um, when you take a first rectangle, then you can split it, divide it by 4, and then divide it again by 4. And for the district, this is a mix between the two. Um, like you can, well, more like a mix with the buildings and subdivision. So you take a first rectangle, which is the whole page, and you can split it into several rectangle of the same size. Then you take again another rectangle, and you can split it in several uniform rectangles, and once again here on several layers, to create complex shapes based on really simple rectangles. But this was a way to create a lot of different composition from that. For the palettes, I have 55 palettes, which are all distributed uniformly, and and for each palette, any color of the palette can be used as a background color, and the other are going to be used for the different element above it. And so we can go through a few different palettes.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what the inspiration was.
Ah,
55
yeah,
is
yeah. Actually, this is really important because I spent so many so many days and nights on it. Actually, my process for creating the palette, as you can see just before on CodePen, uh, all the pieces I was creating all had the same palettes. For many years, I was not really uh, at ease with working with colors, because I felt that it was a really difficult task to do and to work with. But along the years, I had created a, a, um, a tool as well for myself on Observable, which is called Give Me Color. Um, Give Me Colors, just to start working with color. So I went to many different websites like Musli, Adobe Colors, and Color Lovers, just to get palettes from these websites, and to get an idea how to work with color. And it really helped me to learn how to create my own palettes. At first I was just taking the palettes from this website and manipulating the colors, because there was one specific color that I didn't like, so I changed it, changed its saturation, its lightness. um, and then I learned, for Oro I made myself the palette by going wandering in the city, taking a lot of pictures. It was kind of my process every day. I was doing some wanderings and taking pictures, and from there I was extracting the colors that were in the pictures, and then manipulating them on my computer. I had created a few different tools to manipulate the palettes, the different colors, and see quickly a few results, uh, only with simple strokes, just to get an idea of the palette and the different way it could work. And it really took a long time to create all those palettes. As I said, at the on the first version, I had like nearly 191 palettes, and many didn't make the cut to the final version. But I still have, yeah, 55 palettes, which is really, I think, a lot. But that was also a way to define my style and to have something that is really colorful. No, so from going to the first my first ever NFT, which was only in black and white, and to this this huge number of different colors, I wanted to share also my evolution in working with palettes and going full time as a generative artist.
Yeah, I love it. I'm actually curious now to. So you said 55 palettes were included for this specific project. Were they distributed evenly so that each, at least all the 55 were shown up at some point, or were there some that didn't make didn't make the final minter? I guess
No,
make it
no,
out of
no.
the minter.
They all went to the distribution was uniform. Yes.
Okay.
uh, yeah, after the time I had spent on it, on each palette and refining each color for each palette, I really wanted to give a large eventail of the different possibilities of colors. And as you can see, well, this palette is mostly only blues, but some palettes are have way more different colors. um, Let me find one. Maybe this one.
Yeah.
Well, and some colors haven't even been on the background, like this orange has not made it to the background.
Hmm.
So there was a lot more of possibilities with the colors.
Oh, that's so awesome. And how did you go about naming the palettes? I noticed that they might have been, named after specific people or things. Can you talk a little
Yeah,
bit more on that?
every palette has a name. Like for this one, which is resist, or this one, which is xone. The different names of the palettes are actually names from graffiti artists. They're not they're not even well-known, famous graffiti artists, but there were graffiti artists that really influenced me when I was a teenager, and I wanted to pay a tribute to their work. And so the palette are not related the name of a palette is not related to the colors of the palette, but I wanted to pay a tribute and an homage to this graffiti writers that influenced me to create images and then create art, and that was my tribute to them.
I love that. I think it's always interesting to kind of learn. Obviously you have the features, they mean specific things, but also knowing about the inspiration behind, the people that might have influenced you, and you
Mm-mm.
kind of included them. I respect that a lot. I think that's really cool, like in a fun way to kind of pay homage to these people. So I noticed, so a couple of days ago, and I don't believe you were there, but in New York City at the Samsung building, Oro was on the big screen. Was that? Can you tell us a little bit about like your thoughts behind that? And I know you saw some of the photos, you shared some of them on your Twitter, but yeah, I'd love to hear your reaction about those
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah, actually I was really impressed by the pictures. Oro is was thought to have a lot of details, but like uh, a piece can have between I think 20,000 to 40,000 different paths on it with different styles and different length, and it was really made to have a lot of details. And seeing the pieces in such a huge screen was just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it was like, this is the display that I'd love to see over on, and I can't wait to see more pics about it.
Yeah. I know we'll have more pictures, probably in the next few days to share with you. And yeah, I'm excited to see all of them individually and just to see the scale. Like when you see
Mhm.
somebody
Yeah.
standing next to the screen, they look like a little miniature doll in this massive
Mhm.
wall. And it just, the perspective is incredible. So I was glad that, Oro and all these other projects were able to showcase their art on this large screen.
Mhm. Yeah, I had created a feature to export large scale to make large scale export on as PNGs on Auto, just to make sure that it could be printed or visualized at any resolution or any size.
Yeah, I noticed that. So in live view, you have to press, you have numbers 1 through 9 on your
Yeah.
keyboard, and up to 9x resolution version of the art
Mhm.
that anyone could download, which I think is a nice, beautiful touch to, like you said, whether you do it digitally or, maybe if it's printed. Yes, speaking of that, how do you prefer people to display this art? Do you prefer it, printed, digitally, another method?
Actually I'm a huge fan of prints. Maybe you can see it quickly, but my walls are full of prints already, and well, maybe just this space not already as a print, but it's coming. And so for Oro, I went with. At first, I had many different formats, like 16 by 9 or square formats, and finally I went with a single format, which is 2/3, because it's easy to frame. Oh, sorry, I went to the it's easy to frame. You can find frames at this specific format easily at this specific ratio, like 40 by 60 centimeters, or so it was really thought to be printed, and I'm currently working on prints. uh, but also as I said before, I worked a lot on colors and mainly on screen. And if you are using a screen to display Oro, one thing that I'd like to see is just to push the brightness at its maximum. I
Hmm.
know the colors might be really flashy for some, but this was really intended in the creation of the palettes to have a really bright screen to display them.
Great. Yeah, I look forward to seeing these outside of Samsung, just displayed and printed out everywhere. I
Mhm.
think it's such a beautiful project, and
Thank
I would
you.
love it actually if you're able to share some of those personal favorites or maybe some mints that kind of surprised you from this project.
Yeah, I selected a few. I just selected two because
Okay.
well, I'm really I really like the end results. After spending 7 months of generating pieces for a series, there are some point where you think that every pieces look the same, and it's really frustrating as an artist. And then a few days later, you get a new idea, like, okay, I thought about this new composition that I could use, like the recursive grids. And it was like, oh great, I should try that. And it gives a new dynamic to the wall piece, and a new side of the wall series as well. And so for the my selection of the two is number 248, which is this one. Maybe I can zoom in a little. Okay, it's generating the wall piece, and it has this really bright red background. And as I said, I like that the colors are really bright and really like burning the eye. But but it really gives a nice contrast with the dark blues and the different shapes that you can have in it. um, I don't know if I zoom in, not sure it works here. But there, yeah, I wanted to give it a really deep view of the images. And like every path as a transparency over the other, which create many details on the colors that you can have in it. And I wanted to give that. And the second piece is also is a different composition on a white, nearly paper-like color. And to have the different elements that are going through the composition. And I wanted to express it and see the different movement, like being contained in some shapes but still evading it by doing some errands, doing some wanderings.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing those mints with us. I think it's honestly just a incredible project overall, and I really appreciate you sharing with us, the concept and some of these more, just diving in a little bit more about all these features within this project. I think it's just a beautiful, well done project. So I appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
And I don't know, we kind of talked about this via Discord. I don't know if you have any, but like this Twitter breakdown, I don't know if you have, you know, uh, some works in progress that you're willing to share, and maybe that we can kind of talk through. And if not, it's totally fine also. I didn't
No,
follow up
no,
with you.
sure. I could. As I said at the beginning, I have this work, this one, and I created a series which is called Slashes as well. Slashes. So this is this collection. So the idea for this collection is to create. I worked with a friend on a custom smart contract to generate SVG inside the smart contract, and to generate the visuals inside the smart contract. And we are currently working on the upgrade for this series, which could come in 10 days or so. And maybe if I go through through media, I should find. So the next iteration for this series, we are working on a meta collection. So the idea is to have a collection where we have multiple generator, and being able to swap a token for another for another series. And so this visual that we are seeing here is one of the different series that are going to get out later this year. And so this one should come out in July. And yeah, we created a new series for it, maybe, and still generating the wall pieces inside the smart contract.
That's beautiful. I love it. And how many pallets will that project have, or is that something you're still kind of working on?
No, the palettes are already defined, and I think that we have like 47 palettes.
Wow.
And yeah, maybe I can share a tip on the palettes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Please.
because this is a part of the features. For each palette, I am starting with black and white to make sure that I have enough contrast on every single palettes, and then I'm adding colors, as I said, from extracting colors to a palette, and then just to make sure that there is also a color that will really pop from the visual, I add what is called a light in graffiti. This is a way to have the piece stand out. And so for Oro, this is either pure red, or pure yellow. um, well, pure yellow is a mix of green and red.
Hmm.
Um, but this is my way to create my palette. I nearly always have black, white, and either red or yellow, and then several colors. This makes sure that I have contrast and something that will pop for
Hmm.
the visual.
That's awesome. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious to know, uh, just kind of moving forward, are there any techniques? When I talk to artists, generally some of them are interested in exploring other techniques or processes. Is there anything that you're kind of hoping to learn, sometime in the near future, and use that for
Mm,
future projects?
yeah, I always I made my career because I was interested in discovering and learning technologies and what I can do with them. And on my to-do list are trying a bit more with AI as a way to generate ideas and then implement them with my usual techniques. But I think this is a nice tool to generate interesting ideas and to shape the ideas. But then going back to my tools, which is code, which is my medium. And I also plan to I I have that on my to-do list as well for a few years, and I want to explore a bit more with Blender as well. And I know that we can code in Python in Blender, and want to experiment with that. And I'm trying also to create more prints as well. I also do uh, plots. I have an Axidro, and
Oh,
like
nice.
this piece was this one. Inverted camera. um, so yeah, I just want to take some time to get back to the Axidro and to generate pieces that you have in your hands.
I love that. Is that something you would plan to do in the future, like release a project that would be specific for printing on a plotter? Is that something you would explore?
Yeah, this is something that I'm currently exploring with
Okay.
someone else, but I can't share too much detail.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's great. I love pen plotting, and it's something that I haven't seen too much in person. I hope to get one for myself one day, but I think it's such a great way to kind of showcase your art, and to actually see it done physically and created in front of you, I think is a really special thing. So.
Yeah, and I think just looking at the machine work is so mesmerizing. You can just watch it
Hmm.
create display the path, and it's hypnotizing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fascinating to watch, and I just love seeing people, kind of toy around with pen plotters, and yeah,
Mhm.
I think there's a lot to be done in that little space.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I worked in a fab lab as well for 5 years, and also working with um, laser cutters or 3D printers are an interesting way. I also worked a lot with electronics, and I'd like to get back to it, like having some really small displays just to have a generative piece inside of it. So many different things to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like once you learn one thing, then it's like, oh, this other thing has popped up, and I'm sure
Exactly.
you kind of want to explore it all. But outside of coding and creating art, like what do you do in your spare time when you're coding a project? Do you have anything that you do for fun?
For fun, yeah, I have so as I said, I love music, but I don't feel that I'm a musician. But still, I have a few pocket operators for from Teenage Engineering, and I love to play with them. But this is something that I keep for myself
Yeah.
because I don't feel like sharing them. I'm not really confident in my work with
Mhm.
them.
What
And
would you?
I also, yeah,
I was just gonna say, would you ever, maybe if you felt more confident down the road, would you ever incorporate, some generative sound or music into an art piece?
yeah, I'm not sure for generative sound yet, but at least having some loops to start
Mhm.
again with loops and adding some audio to them. But I know that the web does not really support really well audio loops. Like when you have a video with an audio loops, you always you nearly always have a psh at the end of the video. So I don't know yet. Or
Okay.
maybe working with a canvas and having the audio loop smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And for me, I find that mental health is so important in this space. Like everything is moving so quickly. There's a lot
Mm.
of pressure for both, artists, collectors, everyone kind of in the space. Like, how do you wind down once a project is fully minted, or maybe even during the process of coding? What do you do to kind of get in that more like Zen space and kind of just focus, or just kind of
Yeah.
like get everything out of your mindset as far as this space, but then focus on your well-being.
Sure. Well, first maybe is to have dedicated times online, like turning off notification and switching off some networks and giving some time to focus on it to answer to I try to answer everyone, but there are some times where I need to go offline and just focus on one I can. And I also run a lot, or I try at least, because yeah, this is a way to just evacuate everything in your mind and just focus on on the pain
Yeah.
sometimes. But at least you feel way better when you get back to the computer.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And how can people reach you should they have any questions, or maybe you have a website or social media plugs that you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Instagram, but not really active. But mostly on Twitter, I'm really active on it. Well, right now I'm a bit in an offline period,
Hmm.
but this is my main media, and I try to answer, and I do answer everyone on Twitter.
Okay, excellent. And I forgot to ask this actually. Like, are there any exhibits or projects planned for the remainder of the year? I know you mentioned, the work in progress on Twitter that you shared a couple minutes ago, but yeah, any other things planned for the remainder of the year?
Um, Yeah, so there is the upgrade for slashes, and as I said, I am also working on a collaboration around plots. So this should come out. I don't know if this would be before the summer or after it. And also having a few exhibition, but this is still only on plans, so
Okay.
not don't have many information to share yet.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, we look forward to hearing all about that via your social media, and yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Makio135, for joining me on After Dinner Minutes. It was great to
Thank you,
just
Ponyo.
just to like learn all about you, your background. I think it's so interesting to just have these one-on-one conversations with artists. So I really appreciate your time. So I got a couple
Ah,
news and notes. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, the screen froze for a few seconds, and I didn't know if I was still there. But thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a couple news and notes for everyone. So, After Dinner Mints is a podcast as well. So, if you're tuning in via our YouTube video playlist, then make sure you check out the podcast too. It's available weekly. You can check us out on Spotify, Google, Amazon, all those major platforms. Finally, we have a weekly newsletter that gets delivered once a week with information on upcoming drops and generative art related news. You can find a link to the newsletter in the description of this YouTube video. Again, I want to thank Makio135 for joining me on After Dinner Minutes. I really appreciate you being on. For everyone tuning in, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe to the Art Blocks YouTube channel. Be kind to each other. Buy what you love, and we will see you all next week. Thanks very much,
Thank you.
Makio. Have a great day.
Thank you.